Мой вопрос. Есть ли в буддизме разделение типов сознания 16 разума?
So in Buddhism there is a division of 16 type of consciousness. Is there the way to enlightenment? Is it also divided into 16 types? 16 or 18? 16.
16.
So is there a way for each type of consciousness?
What does that mean?
So the information about these 16 types is from psychology. He got this information from psychology.
So in Buddhism, he says that there is a division of consciousness into 16, and is enlightenment also divided into 16 different types of consciousness or not? The path to enlightenment. So it only says, I do not know whether the path is divided into 16 types of consciousness or not, but in the Abhidhamma text, like Abhidhamma Kosha, Abhidhamma Samuccaya, there is mention of the different mental factors. And so these divisions of the mental factors into 51 or 49, so 51 according to Abhidhamma Samuccaya, this includes the negative emotions and also the 11 types of virtuous states of mind. And these virtuous states of mind are something that we need to cultivate within ourselves, and through training and develop them within ourselves. And then there are the 6 root afflictions and so forth, which are to be abandoned or overcome. So a friend of mine, an American scientist, psychologist, or Paul Ekman, has actually enumerated a certain number of 16 or something number of emotions through his research on facial muscle movements and expressions. So the mental, just as Paul Ekman has done and found these 16 types of emotions from his own research, perhaps we could also do some research on the different types of negative emotions mentioned in our scriptures as well, which has to do with the psychology. So maybe we would be able to find more those, find out more those of the negative emotions.
Next question, yes. Когда умирает близкий человек, например, родители, какую мантру следует читать, если рядом нет ламы или ваджрного наставника? Спасибо.
What mantra is good to recite if you don't have lamas available around you?
Если рядом нет ламы или ваджрного наставника? Спасибо.
This is about recitation of mantra for someone who is dying, or what kind of advice we could give to the dying person. So primarily the Buddha says that you are your own master. So as it says here, what kind of rebirth you would take, or Russian translation. Are you
Почему-то
on?
нет русского перевода на русском канале, мы не слышим ничего. Пожалуйста, проверьте техники. Русский канал не слышно.
Buttons here. Volume.
Проверьте, сейчас звук пошел, да?
The equipment, test equipment. Okay.
Okay. So primarily, the Buddha, as the Buddha says, you are your own master. What kind of rebirth we would take? So His Holiness will repeat what he has said. So what he had said earlier. So in ancient Indian culture and tradition, there is lots of explanation of psychology. So in ancient Indian spiritual traditions, there's also an explanation of shamatha and vipassana. Generally speaking, there is no difference. It's common to both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. And so where there is explanation of shamatha and vipassana, you have lots of explanation of mind as well. And so, particularly in Buddhism, in Abhidhamma Kosha, there is mention of the many levels of the grounds of mind and so forth. And then in Abhidhamma Samuccaya, there is also mention of the 51 types of mental factors. And then also there's mention of 8 types of consciousness. And then 51 types of mental events or factors. And then in Tantra, there is also a division of mind into degrees of subtlety between gross and subtle states of mind. And then a scientist, American scientist named Paul Ekman, my friend, has actually identified based on the facial expression or emotions, expressions of people, he has identified 16 types of emotions. And so, when it comes to psychology, we don't have to talk about religion as such, but we are dealing with the reality on the ground level. And as we talk about the ground reality, the basis and the path and so forth. And so many scientists, for example, medical scientists, also take interest in these enumerations of the different mental factors. And so maybe we can make more further development in the psychology from using scientific research and experiments. And then the answer to the next question, mainly while you are alive, while somebody is alive, you should be able to live a positive life. If possible, to help others by helping others and having kindness, being kind to others. Even if you cannot help others, at least don't harm them. And then at the time of death, if people could, even though they may not have any kind of religious ideas, but if they could have a calm and peaceful mind, that would be really helpful. But if you have lived a very sinful life while you are alive, then it's going to be very difficult if you ask for some blessing from somebody else to help you. Of course, there is a saying that even a sinner can be forcibly liberated through power practice, the projection of minds out of the body. Perhaps this could help, but it's difficult. If that is true for everyone, the Buddha didn't need to give so much teaching. He could have just taught the power and practice power. But most important thing for a dying person is if they could actually have positive states of mind while they are reaching the end of their life, and if no religious thoughts or ideas could be generated, at least they should be calm, and the attachment and lust and so forth should not arise in them. And then, as for Buddhists, if you could remind the dying person of bodhicitta and emptiness, or you could mention the names of Buddhas and try to instill in the person these positive states of mind, virtuous states of mind.
Иногда, например, защищаясь от грабителей, приходится применить силу. Иногда, видя несправедливость, творящуюся рядом, тоже хочется применить силу. Но иногда люди, прикрываясь идеями справедливости, например, начинают войну. Может ли буддист принимать деятельное участие в восстановлении справедливости и каким образом понять, когда это можно сделать, а когда нет?
Your Holiness, sometimes the parents have to be forceful towards their children. Sometimes when you see injustice, you need to use force just to restore justice. The question is, what can the Buddhist do to actively support justice? What can be violence or force be used in some cases?
I think I did say something about this yesterday. When we talk about cultivating patience or meditating on patience, the wrongdoing that is done towards you by by patience, we are not saying that we totally, let the other person to do whatever the person, he or she is doing to us, the bad thing. But patience means you should not have anger and hatred towards the other person. In other words, it's about forgiveness. But if you just leave the person, or let the person do whatever the wrongdoing they are doing, then it actually ultimately harms them. So what you need to do is try to stop the wrongdoing that the person is doing with a motivation which is altruistic. So with that altruistic, even if you actually do something which is quite rough physically. So for example, with regard to compassion, it could be motivated by anger or hatred. So although right in the moment you may have a very rough or negative state of mind, but in the background it is underlined by this kind of compassion. So in that case, then the wrathful kind of aspect of or the expression is okay. Therefore, we see the deities depicted as wrathful, expressing wrath. So that is not showing that the deities are angry as such, but because they are motivated by compassion, they arise or they actually express themselves in wrathful manners to help others.
Some people, when we do a Bodhisattva vows, we swear that we are going to help every sentient being to get enlightenment. Now I'm struggling a lot with to understand Nagarjuna, and from
Russian.
No, I'm not Russian.
You come from which country?
I'm German. Germany.
Germany, oh.
And now my question is, if from a logical point of view, is it possible at all that at one point of time every sentient being gets enlightenment? And if yes, what will happen to mind streams and to the conceptual world?
알아서 쓰는 상집에 내가 쓰되. 들으시도. 이 주도 제 먹어서 그래. 누구야 그래요 말해.
So this is something we should not, actually, not our business, perhaps.
It is something Buddhist literature.
So you got
You see, in the case of individual, there is possibility of end of samsara or suffering. In the terms of entire sentient being, some literature say no end. World remain, world or samsara, will remain forever. So, then the question, when everybody become enlightened, that's impossible, but if happen, good, no problem. Yes. I think that's okay. Okay. 나중에 you disagree. 투절만. 스베트지 상집에 내가. 근데 로저서 고디.
So usually when monks debate in a debating courtyard, at the time when everybody becomes enlightened, then what happens with the mind? So these kind of questions usually in the debate courtyards are called, these are questions regarding at the time.
You from Deutschland?
So, yeah, as we say, literally.
Your Holiness, have a long life. My question, many people and books say, be happy, live your life, do what you want, but never lose yourself. Your Holiness, I just don't clearly understand what does it mean to lose someone's self. Maybe you will explain it to me and give an advice, what should people do not to lose themselves in life? Thank you.
Be happy.
Don't lose yourself.
So you should be able to fulfill your own goal. You should be able to fulfill your own goal as well as the benefit of to benefit others, the interest of others. So when we talk about bodhicitta, we are thinking in terms of becoming enlightened, a Buddha, for the benefit of other sentient beings. So when you cultivate and meditate on bodhicitta, it's just as it is said that in order to fulfill the interest of oneself and others, I will generate bodhicitta, and so. So of course you are thinking of helping all other sentient beings, and yourself as well. And so even if you don't fulfill the highest goal, still you'll be thinking of helping others. And so the best means to achieve or fulfill one's own interest and interest of others is bodhicitta. And when you reach Buddhahood, it is called that you reach a state where you have actually perfected the interest of oneself and others. Reach that final goal. And then within the practice of bodhicitta, we actually say that we reduce the self-cherishing attitude and embrace others more than oneself. Because if you remain self-cherishing, then ultimately what it does is harm you instead of helping you, because it is foolish. thinking, and therefore it harms you. And so right now we are full of self-cherishing attitude, and therefore when we are told that we should actually lose ourselves or you should disregard our own welfare, and because of our strong self-cherishing attitude, this actually comes as a shock, this kind of statement. And therefore, if you really want to help oneself and others, you should cherish others. And so we should not be foolishly selfish, but we should be selfish wisely. And so the Bodhisattvas are wisely selfish in that sense. So you should not misunderstand when we say, of course, to sacrifice your own welfare and think of others. And you should not think that you should not do anything for yourself, but only work for others. That this misunderstanding should not happen.
Can we do this? In which way?
Будьте добры еще раз, произнесите, мы не расслышали начало.
Далай Лама часто говорит о том, что в раннем детстве многие из нас недополучают любви от родителей. Вот. И как, если мы не додали, теперь мы имеем
So
детей,
from our parents in childhood, we have not received enough love, and therefore we have not given the same kind of love to our own children as well.
и мы еще пока живы и все-таки пытаемся развиваться.
Спасибо. Your Holiness,
So how could we improve this situation while we are alive?
received much love during the first years of their lives. They become happier persons. But what if we as parents did not give much love, enough love to our children for some reason? And now our children are grown up and we are still here. And is there any way we could just correct our mistakes, our past mistakes, and do something for our children which we did not do when they were younger?
I have no such experience. I am monk, no children. I think you know better how to handle that problem. You know better. My own father, very, very short temper. So if I become father, possible become like my own father, very short temper. So my children. Next question.
Его Святейшество, этот замечательный мужчина приехал из самой дальней точки из Якутии. Он перевел Бодхичарья Аватару на якутский язык и хочет передать его Святейшество Далай Ламе и задать вопрос.
Your Holiness, this gentleman, he came from Yakutia.
What?
This is
I see.
Yakutia.
Which
this is
language?
A very northern
Which
part
language?
of Russia.
Yes,
You know
yes.
it's minus 60
I
in
am
winter. And he translated Yakut.
Oh,
Yakut. Yakut.
He comes from some place called
This is in Siberia.
Yakutia.
He translated Bodhicharya
Oh,
Avatara into
in
Yakut
Siberia,
language.
and he has
would like to
translated
present it to
Bodhisattva
you.
Charya Avatara into his language, and
wonderful.
he's presenting the book to His Holiness, the manuscript.
Then I think you come here. You come here. And
Please
take a
go
picture.
up.
Пожалуйста.
It's this one. No. This person didn't ask. This is his one? Oh, I thought there was another one. Ah. Yakutia.
Okay. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, next question.
Драгоценный учитель, по просьбе верующих Бурятии, по просьбе наших бабушек и дедушек, я хочу вам преподнести дары Бурятии и картину бурятского мастера из гобелена. Они просят вас даровать драгоценный нектар, бесконечный драгоценный нектар учений из жизни во всей Вселенной.
Your Holiness, on behalf of
So she basically asked for His Holiness, asked His Holiness to continue giving teachings on the nectar of his teachings. What's painting about?
And ask you to continue to give us the precious Dharma and to live long for the benefit of all the sentient beings.
Okay.
They wanted to present the painting to His Holiness.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh.
For the session.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, no?
В конце наших мудрых учений смогут ли представители 5 государств получить компакт-диск вашего голоса, музыку, симфонию вашей речи? Один вопрос.
What?
Yeah, at the end of the teachings, will the representatives of 5 states receive the disc with your precious voice, with the music of your teachings? It's supposed to be, supposed to be a question. But
Okay.
So basically the guy is asking if it's possible for him to get the CD or the recording of these teachings of His Holiness.
So, thank you.
Thanks, His Holiness is saying he expressed them very poetically, so thank you.
Возможно ли рассмотрение Республики Бурятия в качестве места вашей будущей реинкарнации? Спасибо.
Your Holiness, we are from Buryatia, and is it possible that your next reincarnation will be born in Buryatia?
I think according to my health, there's no hurry to discuss about that. One time in America, New York, you see, we have some conference. At one press meeting, one French journalist has asked me about my next life, or next reincarnation or next life. Then I put aside my glass, then look at, show my face to him. Is it quite, is it urgent or is it a question of something, something,
any hurry?
Something Sorry. Yes, yes. Judging my face, is it something hurry? Oh, oh. Then he said no. So then okay, no, no problem. Next question.
Ваше святейшество, бывает, когда я начинаю переживать за страдания других людей и животных, я порой испытываю очень сильное чувство вины за то, что я не могу им помочь. И порой в некоторых ситуациях это чувство вины переходит в очень своеобразное чувство гнева за то, что я не могу им помочь. В каком ключе мне нужно работать над этим, и является ли такое чувство вины своеобразным проявлением моего эго?
Your Holiness, sometimes when I think about the sufferings of animals and other beings, I feel guilty because I cannot help them. And this guilt sometimes becomes an anger against myself because I cannot help them. What is the right way to work with this guilt? Is this feeling of guilt the form of my egocentrism?
When you see people suffering and you feel that you are helpless, you cannot do anything, it is good. That kind of state of mind is good. And so with that kind of thought, you should try to work to make yourself capable. You build up your ability to help others more and more. So with the compassion and affection towards others, seeing the suffering of others, what happens, what it leads to, that kind of compassion leads to, is it leads you to develop Bodhisattva, which focuses on enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's why it's good. But if you actually become angry when you see the suffering of others and you feel that you are helpless, that's not the right way of carrying yourself about. You have to have a very holistic state of mind and work to help others. So otherwise, the Bodhisattvas would also have to commit suicide because they have this strong, intense sense of helping others. And because they are not able to fulfill that right away, and they would have to commit suicide. But that's not the way they go about. And so you should not have a narrow state of mind and be angry, become angry when you feel the others suffering. You have to use your intelligence wisely.
It's great happiness to be with you in this hall and listen to your teaching. I will ask in Russian. Мы знаем, что вас часто приглашают на Запад, в частности в Америку. Как вы видите будущее буддизма в Америке? И не могли бы вы рассказать немножко о бурятском геше Даба Самбу, который наряду с геше
His Holiness always visits USA, and the question is, how do you see the state of Buddhism in the US?
Your Holiness, the question is, you often go to America to teach. Could you please say, how do you see, what is the future of Buddhism in America, in the United States? And also, could you please tell a few words about the Buryat Geshe Dawa Sangpo, who lived in the United States with Geshe Wangyal and worked with him?
As I said yesterday, in this world there are many different religious traditions. So these will continue to remain in the world, and they must do so, because it's better for these religious traditions to survive. Of course, not all human beings on this earth would be religious, nor could they be Buddhist? Because it doesn't help. And it's not helpful if everyone has to turn into Buddhist. And because of the predispositions, mental predispositions of different beings, we must also have the different traditional religions. So I go to various countries like Australia, America, and European countries. Wherever I go in these nations, I tell them that you traditionally you are Judo-Christian, you have Judo-Christian background, religious background. And so this is your traditional religion. These are your traditional religion. And I tell them that it's better always to keep your own religions, traditional religions, because conversion is complicated. So I use an example. For example, in the 60s, when Tibetans first came into exile, our settlements had not yet started, and whereas some schools have already started, these secular schools, and most of the people, the Tibetans, were actually road workers, building roads. And so from amongst these Tibetans, the road workers, one woman had a husband who was a Tibetan government official in the past, and then he died, and then she was left with 2 or 3 small children. And then she had great difficulties. So I think it was around 1962, that she came to see me and told me that her husband had died and that she had these 2 or 3 children, and she faced lots of problems. And then of course, Christian missionaries and relief organizations have really helped Tibetans with providing food, and then this lady told me that her children were helped by some Christian society, Christian community, and then she told me that in this life, she told me, I'm a Christian, whereas in the next life I will be a Buddhist. So what this shows is confusion, clearly. She didn't know the whole structure of Christianity nor Buddhism. And therefore, when conversion actually creates more complications in people, and so it's better to always keep to one's own traditional religion. And so in the U.S., for example, there are Japanese, Koreans, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and
Buddhist community. And then some non-Buddhist community. As some people, as an individual, some really showing interest about Buddhism. Like in Buddhist country, like Tibetan and Mongolian, Buddhist country. But among us, some Christians, some Muslims there. As individual freedom, like that.
And then regarding Sokpo, the Mongolian monk Dawa Sangpo and Geshe Wangyal, who lived in New Jersey in the United States. I knew him from Tibet. And in 1979, during my first visit to the U.S., I found him to be really sincere in whatever he did. And then from amongst his students, we have today Robert Thurman and Jeffrey Hopkins and many others. And so these people are very good scholars who knew Tibetan and Buddhism and have translated books, and they even teach others. So Geshe Wangyal I knew really well. He was a very good person, and I don't know much about Dawa Sangpo, the Mongolian.
Следующий вопрос, немножко социального характера. Вы в первой части подчеркнули важность вина и соблюдения монашеских обетов. И, в общем-то, в последнее время лично я наблюдала несколько случаев, когда люди, в частности, нарушали обет безбрачия, то есть они продолжали носить монашеское облачение, будучи женатыми. И, соответственно, в этой связи вопрос, каковы кармические последствия и как обществу реагировать на подобные ситуации.
Your Holiness, during the first session, you were talking about Vinaya. And sometimes, especially in the Western community, some monks, they just disrobe, they just abandon their vows. So what are the karmic results of such actions? And what shall the society do about it? How to react on this?
So the Buddha himself has given the ordination, the lineage of ordination of novice and bhikshus. And of course, if somebody is not able to keep their vows, the Buddha also had said, laid down in the discipline, that they can give back their vows. So it is quite a standard practice to give back the vows if you are not able to keep them. So according to the different mental dispositions of different practitioners, we have upasakas that within the lay person's vows. We have the upasaka who takes refuge in the rituals, and then upasakas with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or all 5 vows. And then there is also the 1 day, 24-hour vow for lay persons. For people who cannot keep other vows, I mean, this practice is also there. And so there are many different types of vows and precepts that you can actually take or keep. So the best would be if when you take the monk's ordination, monastic ordination, there are questions such as, are you not prohibited by your parents or kings? There are these type of questions which are actually to check whether the person is able to actually take the vow and after taking them keep them or not, and so forth. And so there is no way we can force on others to take vows as such. And then with regard to the teaching of the Buddha, it's very clearly mentioned in the Vinaya, without being asked, don't teach. And so, if someone comes to you and requests for teaching, then you should give teaching. Otherwise not. Without being requested, you should not. So this is how the basic, the fundamental principle of Buddhism when giving teaching. So without actually taking into account the different mental dispositions of the disciples or the followers, if you just go on give teachings, they may not fit.
Holiness, I'm sorry, I just would like to add, I did not translate you the other part, which is, if the person just breaks the vows of monk, but continues to wear monk's robes.
Well, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. That actually deceiving other. Suppose monk, but actually not monk. Like that.
So this is actually deceiving others. So the monk's robes is called the saffron robe. And then there is also the measurement of the robes, what kind of length and so forth. So you should keep, once you are taking the vows, you should keep it. Keep them. So in the past, the previous Karmapa Rinpoche, the Karmapa Rinpoche's attendant, the main attendant, became disrobed, and then he kept long hair and actually made plates on his head, with his head. So one day I saw him and I told him that you really look gorgeous as a layperson. And so he told me that becoming a monk is not easy. So he said that you have to shave your head and also be able to keep restrained sex. And so because he was not able to do that, then he became quite a gorgeous-looking layperson. And so these days, there are people who actually do all kinds of wrongdoings, such as keeping women and taking alcohol in the name of Tantra. That's totally wrong. The masters like Nagarjuna and all these 80 masters, Indian Mahasiddhas, in the 80 Mahasiddhas, most of them were practitioners of Tantra. For example, Master Nagarjuna himself reached enlightenment within that lifetime based on the practice of Tantra. And then most of the Tibetan masters also were practitioners of Tantra, but they lived as celibate monks. So in the past also, there were people who misused Tantra. And because of that, it's very. These are quite very dangerous to cause damage to the Dharma.
В Калмыкии и во всей России активно развивается мясное скотоводство.
In Russia and Kalmykia.
Фермеров и их семей единственным источником пропитания. Ваше Святейшество, вот такой вопрос: как быть российскому фермеру, буддисту, ставшему на путь бодхичитты и культивирующему в себе сострадание ко всем живым
Farming and cattle herding,
при
or keeping cattle.
этим делом? И насколько, возможно, необходимо проводить дополнительные ритуалы или обряды? И насколько
So if you're keeping cattle and doing farming, how do you keep your
question is from Kalmykia. So what shall do the farmers? What the farmers, the farmers? Farmers shall do if they grow livestock and then they kill these animals, to make food. So, and if they are Buddhists, does it affect kind of their karma, and what maybe special rituals they can do, and what can they do as Buddhists? Because this occupation just gives them money and,
Oh, yeah. That is a little difficult sort of situation. Farmer, part of the community, like northern Tibet, nomads, their life very much depend on the animal product, including meat. So the complete change, then the whole, the nomad community, I think their whole sort of way of life have to change. Then climate condition, you cannot grow vegetable. Difficult. So Tibet, over 1,000 years, very, very religious, Buddhist religious-minded people, community. But also be realistic. So then difficult. Now, that's really difficult. Now in Tibet, some area, you see people really, they stop killing animal. Wonderful. But then there are whole sort of animal herds sold. And then the basis of the community, nomad, then this eventually disappear. That also, you see, we have to sort of think, so various factors. So then what we can do is, like I think beef farm or like poultry, as far as Tibetan community in India, Tibetan refugee community settlement, no single poultry. Sometime back, early period, some poultry. Then I appeal, if that something highly necessary for their settlement, then I have nothing to say. But if not that much important, then please close these poultry. So now, no single poultry in whole our settlement. Similarly, piggery, fishery. It is not necessary for our settlement. A little bit luxury. Then also all our monastic institution, the common kitchen serve only vegetarian food. But individual monk, up to individual. Sometimes I was told, you see, the nearby the big monastery, some restaurant selling, Tibetan momo with meat. So he said, since common kitchen serving only vegetarian food, so these private restaurant who's selling some non-vegetarian food, very, very successful. So like that. So these try to avoid killing animal as much as possible. But go extreme also is sometimes difficult. Then meantime, you see in Tibetan, nomad area, you see, they have to kill some of their animal. But the day they kill, you see, the whole member of the family recite Om Mani Padme Hum. And a butter lamp keep in their tent, like that. So that means the same act, killing, but killing with feeling of regret and some kind of shakwa. Confession. Confession. Like that. So I think you should some prayer. In Tibet, usually in Lhasa, some Muslim community, they usually killing, butcher, and also some Buddhist community also. So there is a tradition, the blessed pill, Maniribu. Maniribu, you see those animals going to kill, usually you should give some chill up like that. And that also, at least some method like that we do. Okay, now last question.
Ваше Святейшество, у меня такой вопрос. Очень много религий в мире. А какая религия самая большая? Вот такой вопрос. Может быть, всем полезно это знать?
Your Holiness, there are many religions in the world. Do you know which one has most of followers? Which one of the religions are the biggest one in the world?
Christian. I think over 1 billion followers. Then Muslim, also, I think about billion. Then I think Hinduism, perhaps 600-700 millions. Then Buddhists, more or less, I think same number, 600-700 millions. I think most small, I mean the less number, I think follow Zorazuddin, Parsi community in Bombay, I think less than 100,000. In their original place in Iran, although you see there are some, I was told, some practitioner of Zorazuddin, Iran, even today, but very, very few. Like that. So, thank you. Now text.
Thank you. So we continue from the verse where we left, which says the last one was which intelligent person would despair to ride the horse of Bodhisattva, which in fact takes you from bliss to bliss. Next. So what we have covered are the how to eliminate or dispel or overcome the obstacles, and next is how to gather the forces, the prerequisites for the. And so with regard to this, there are 4 forces. So the supports when working for the sake of living beings are aspiration, steadfastness, joy, and rest. As aspiration is developed through fear of misery and by contemplating the benefits of aspiration itself. Thus, in order to increase my enthusiasm, I should strive to abandon its opposing forces, to amass the supports of aspiration, self-confidence, joy, and rest. And so these are the 4 forces to practice in earnest and to become strong in self-control. So since we need to gather so much merit and wisdom to fight, to combat against those forces which obstruct us to reach omniscience, we really need courage, a huge determination. I shall have to overcome the boundless faults of myself and others, and in order to destroy each of these faults alone, I may have to strive until an ocean of eons is exhausted. Yet, if within myself I do not perceive even a fraction of this perseverance required to exhaust these faults, then why do I not have a heart attack? For now I have become an abode for infinite miseries. So this is Likewise, I shall have to realize many excellent qualities of myself, and others, and so forth. So if you do not do this, then you would be wasting your life. Therefore, you should work not to waste your life. And in order to attain each of these qualities alone, I may have to acquaint myself with its cause until an ocean of illness is exhausted. However, I have never developed acquaintance with even a fraction of these excellences. How strange it is to squander this birth I have found by some coincidence. So the fact that we want happiness and do not want suffering, nobody needs to prove this to us. Even the mosquitoes do not want suffering and want happiness. This is something natural to us. But mostly what we have to know is there are two types of pain and pleasure. One is physical and the other is mental. And the latter is more important. And particularly we who are human beings who have this intelligence, and because of which we have lots of hopes and fears which give rise to unhappiness. And so we have to find what makes us unhappy. What are the causes that cause unhappiness? Therefore, you have to work against them by knowing these causes. And therefore, what one should do is to try to subdue our mind. And because when you are able to subdue the mind, then many of the causes that give rise to suffering also can cease. Yet committing 43, on page 83, yet by committing negative actions, although I may wish for happiness, wherever I go I shall be completely overcome by weapons of pain caused by my wrongful life. And so if you could cultivate positive states of mind, which is to help others, to benefit others, and when you actually engage in the actions which bring about happiness in others, then those are positive or virtuous actions. Whereas those actions which, when you commit, cause unhappiness, suffering to others, and discomforts, then those are negative or non-virtuous actions. So apart from that, these ways of understanding negative and positive actions, there's no other way of knowing them. So, and one single action may be helpful to others, beneficial to others. If that is the case, then that is something we should do. Whereas the same action under certain circumstances cause this suffering to others, then that, of course, the action itself, all by itself, we cannot talk about whether it's positive or not. But depending on the circumstances, whether it helps someone or whether it harms others, we have to differentiate between whether it's positive or negative. So there is no positive or negative action which is absolute by itself, without dependence on others, other causes. And so, for example, if with a selfish attitude, if you try to say something is there where it is not, and if you and say something is not there where it is, then that's also a lie. Whereas in order to save someone's life with a positive, with a kind and beneficial motivation, if you, in order to avert someone from committing a negative action, you may use certain language, lie, which is generally a lie, but because of your motivation, it becomes a positive. And so, positive and negative actions are dependent on your state of mind, your motivation. And also, we make difference between peace and non-violence. Those also cannot be absolute peace or negative, but they depend on other conditions. So even if an action may look rough and coarse, but if it is motivated by a thought to benefit someone, then the action may also be positive, considered positive. Whereas with ulterior motivation, in order to deceive somebody or gain something, then if you to gain something from the others, and even if you may use very nice language and expressions, physical expressions and so forth, those motivations, because of those motivations, the action becomes, your nice words and actions become negative. And then the next comes the product of our positive actions, or the result of positive and negative actions. So verse number 44, as a result of virtue I shall dwell in their spacious, fragrant, cool heart of lotus flower. My radiance will be nourished by the food of conqueror's sweet speech. My glorious form will spring from a lotus unfolded by the mighty one's light. And as a bodhisattva I shall abide in the presence of the conquerors. However, as a result of non-virtue, my skin will be ripped off by the helmsman of Yama. In this feeble state, liquid copper melted by tremendous heat will be poured into my body, pierced by flaming sword and daggers. My flesh will be cut into 100 pieces, and I shall tumble upon the fiercely blazing iron ground. Therefore, so because of the reasons above, I should aspire for virtue, and with great respect acquaint myself with it. And then this verse shows there's this mention of having undertaken the wholesome in the manner of Vajradvaja, which is a part of a sutra from the Avatamsaka Sutra. I should then proceed to acquaint myself with self-confidence. So here, self-confidence is not arrogance, but you actually develop a kind of a determination and courage. So first of all, I should examine well what is to be done, to see whether I can pursue it or cannot undertake it. If I am unable, it is best to leave it. But once I have started, I must not withdraw. And then with regard to the pride, there are three types. So first one, with regard to the first one, this is the pride of action. If I do, then this habit will continue in others' life. And thinking I shall alone do this is the self-confidence of action. So that's, even if you may face lots of problems, difficulties, you should it's not like someone actually urges you to do, but you actually take on the initiative to do the action. Powerless, this mind is disturbed. People in this world are unable to benefit themselves. Therefore, I shall do it for them, since, unlike me, these beings are incapable. So here, this kind of self-confidence should not be done through under the influence of negative emotions. As the verse number 51c says. And if you actually feel that you cannot do it, then you will not be able to achieve anything. And so this low self-esteem will get you nowhere. You have to whip up the courage to do things, actions. When crows encounter a dying snake, they will act as though they were eagles. Likewise, if my self-confidence is weak, I shall be injured by the slightest downfall. How can those who, out of faint-heartedness, have given up trying to find liberation because of this deficiency? Yet even the greatest obstacle will find it hard to overcome. One with a firm mind. And then next one. Therefore, with a steady mind, I shall overcome all faults. So this is the self-confidence of the afflictions, which means that I will destroy the negative emotions. I will never let myself be overwhelmed by, overtaken by the negative emotions. I will always be the victorious one over these negative emotions. This kind of called self-confidence is called self-confidence with regards to negative emotions. I will conquer everything, and nothing at all shall conquer me. I, a child of lion, like conqueror, should remain self-confident in this way. And so this also refers to the same type of self-confidence or pride. Whoever has self-importance is destroyed by it, is disturbed and has no self-confidence. For those with self-confidence do not succumb to the power of the enemy, whereas the former are under the sway of the enemy of self-importance. Inflated by the disturbing conceptions of my self-importance, I shall be led by it to the lower realms. It destroys the joyous festival of being human. I shall become a slave, eating the food of others. Stupid, ugly, feeble, and everywhere disrespected. Though tough people bloated by conceit are also counted among the self-important. Tell me, what is important, more pathetic than this? So, not letting yourself be overcome by these negative emotions, but having this courage to overcome them. But you should not have the arrogance whereby you actually look down upon others and disregard others. But whatever you have to do, you make sure that you are the first one to take the initiative, but without any negative emotion, kind of arrogance, but you're holding yourself lowly and humble. Whoever seizes the self-confidence in order to conquer the enemy of self-importance, so which is the negative emotion, enemy of negative emotion. So you have to hold to this antidote, hold on to the antidote, which is the self-confidence, not negative emotion. They are the self-confidence ones, with the victorious heroes. And in addition, whoever definitely conquers the spread of this enemy, self-importance, completely wins the fruit of conqueror, fulfilling the wishes of the world. If I find myself amidst a crowd of disturbing conceptions, I shall enjoy them in 1,000 ways. Like a lion among foxes, I will not be affected by disturbing hosts, just as men will guard their eyes when great danger and turmoil occur. Likewise, and so you what you'd see is the negative emotions as your enemies. So we talk about devils or evil beings or evil forces. So the evil here refers mainly to the negative emotions. And then because of those negative emotions, we create karma and we have the contaminated psychophysical aggregates. Those are termed as the amara of aggregates. It would be better for me to be burned, to have my head cut off and be killed, rather than ever bowing down to those ever-present disturbing conceptions. So likewise, in all situations, I should do nothing other than what is fit. And so, if you check the negative emotions, they do not have any supporting valid reasons. But because of your grasping at some kind of an independent self, then it lacks any wisdom and intelligence. Whereas the antidotes, if you actually, the more thought you give to it, you'll be able and cultivate it. It actually increases and intensifies further and further, and the negative emotions are actually overcome and reduced and overcome. So just like those who yearn for the fruits of play, bodhisattvas are attracted to whatever task they may do. They never have enough. It only brings them joy. If I feel that I never have enough sensual objects, which is like honey smeared upon a razor's edge, then why should I ever feel that I have enough merit, which ripens in happiness and peace? So verse number 66, 65, done. So first you have the self-confidence of aspiration, and then you gather all the forces for the conducive, favorable conditions, and then you develop this kind of courage, self-confidence. And therefore, thus, in order to complete this task, I shall venture into it just as an elephant tormented by the midday sun plunges into a cool, refreshing lake. And so you should have this great determination and courage to cultivate virtue, and also seeing the negative consequences of negative actions, and you will try to overcome them. And then the confidence to abandon. So because of this verified psychophysical aggregate, there are some kind of shortcomings or limitation to this body, and whereas when you are totally able to kind of gain control over your body, your energy, wind energy and so forth, then you do not, there comes a time when you do not have to rely or depend on this very gross body. And so until that time comes, you have to depend and rely on this kind of psychophysical aggregate. And when my strength declines, it says, therefore, I should leave, verse number 67 on page 87, and I should leave whatever I am doing in order to be able to continue with it later. So you should take rest, in other words. It says, when you feel tired, not just pushing yourself. So you should not push yourself, be stubborn, but take rest. Having done something well, I should put it aside with a wish to accomplish what will follow. So when you actually engage in the practice itself, you need to show mindfulness and introspection. With these two, you should actually persevere on constantly with these two. Rely on them. Just as an old warrior approaches, for example, it says, just as an old warrior approaches the swords of an enemy upon the battlefront, so shall I avoid the weapons of disturbing conceptions and skillfully bind this enemy. When you reflect on the virtuous states of mind, of course, sometimes you feel tired, and when you feel low in your spirit, you should again, have the self-confidence, build the self-confidence up. If someone drops a sword during a battle, they would immediately pick it up out of fear. Likewise, if I lose the weapon of mindfulness, I should quickly retrieve it, being afraid of hell. So if you lose mindfulness, or your mindfulness weakens, then you have negative emotions and not able to show any counterforce, or so that the negative emotions kind of seep into your being like oil seeping through a pepper. And when that happens, it says, just as poison spreads throughout the body and depends upon the circulation of blood, likewise, if disturbing conceptions finish, an opportunity unwholesome will permeate my mind. So how do we show mindfulness is shown by this verse number 71. So it says, those who practice should be as attentive as a frightened man carrying a jar full of mustard oil, who is being threatened by someone with a sword and told that he will be killed if he spills just one drop. And just as I would swiftly stand up if a snake came into my lap, likewise, if any sleep or laziness occurs, I shall quickly turn it back. Each time something unwholesome occurs, I should criticize myself and then contemplate for a long time that I shall never let this happen again. Likewise, in all these situations, I shall acquaint myself with mindfulness. With this motivation as a cause, I shall aspire to meet with teachers and accomplish the task. And then, so by thinking about the pros and cons of virtue and non-virtue, you should have the courage, and then and also when you engage in the practice and you feel tired, you take rest. And so in this way, you should persevere in your practice over a long period of time. And therefore, then what happens is in time, you'll be able to gain control over what you are doing. And this is what 75 says. In order to have strength for everything, I should recall before undertaking any action, the advice in the chapter on conscientiousness, and then joyfully rise to the task. Just as the wind blowing back and forth controls the movement of a piece of cotton, so shall I be controlled by joy, and in this way accomplish everything. So this completes the 7th chapter on joyous effort. And next is chapter on meditation. So in this, the actual practice of cultivation of bodhicitta is taught. So the chapter 8 shows the conventional bodhicitta, and the 9th chapter shows the ultimate bodhicitta. And so these are the two main practices that we have to cultivate. So from chapter 1 to 7, we are collecting all the positive, favorable conditions for these two practices of bodhicittas. So now we are, let's turn to the meditation chapter. Having developed enthusiasm in this way, I should place my mind in concentration. So concentration is one of the 51 mental factors. One of the mental factors which is within the category of what is known as yulngenga, the 5 yulnges, or determining consciousnesses, determining mental factors. And then there are other mental factors which are such as those of the omnipresent, and then the 5 omnipresent, 5 determining mental factors, determining mental factors which determine object. So with wisdom, what you do is you analyze things. So in order to be able to fix your mind, you have to actually direct your mind towards the object. For that, you have to have attention. And so having place your attention on the object, then staying fixed on that object without wavering or distraction is concentration. And so development of shamatha is in order to develop that concentration, single-pointed concentration. And so we have the basic qualities of concentration and wisdom, and we kind of foster them further through cultivation of shamatha and vipassana wisdom. And so shamatha and vipassana are something which is common to both Buddhists and non-Buddhists. So in India, even today, there are hermits, non-Buddhist hermits, living in the Himalayas, high Himalayan mountains, naked even. They live in snow mountains. This year, during the Mahakumbha Mela, I wanted to visit the Mahakumbha Mela, the Great Kumbh Mela, which is where many non-Buddhist and Hindu practitioners gather. And so I wanted to meet some of them and to have discussions on their practices, but I couldn't go there. So shamatha is something which is common to Buddhists. And then with regard to vipassana, Vipassana, development of Vipassana in relation to selflessness and the ultimate reality of things is only in the Buddhist tradition and not in the non-Buddhist. Whereas by seeing the shortcomings of the desire ram and detaching themselves from the desire ram sensual objects and then developing the concentrations of the concentration form ram and so forth is there in the non-Buddhist tradition. So which is common to both Buddhist and non-Buddhist. Of course, as we already came across the verse, through familiarization, there's nothing which doesn't easy. And therefore, if you show familiarity, if you familiarize your mind with the thing, for example, in the schools, we have school students who are able to stay focused on the subject that they are studying, whereas others who are not able to have that kind of attention. And so we can actually cultivate this single-pointed concentration where the mind actually is focusing on the object steadily. So you need to actually train your mind so that slowly and gradually, even if you in the beginning you may be able to focus your mind on the object that you choose for 1 second through familiarization, and you may be able to extend that time span to 10 seconds and so forth. So I know some Americans for the last 40 years or so, they have been really doing practice. So today they are able to focus their mind single-pointedly on one object for about 3 hours or so, without distraction. So this is they are not meditating on selflessness as such, but so there is an institution which is actually meant for cultivation of single-pointed concentration in Thailand. So of course in Thailand and Burma they have good practice of this single-pointed concentration practice, meditation. Of course, they also have the meditation on selflessness, but the subtlest, the understanding of selflessness is not there in the Pali, but only in the Sanskrit tradition. So while you focus your mind single-pointed on the object, it's not sufficient just to be able to focus your mind there, fix your mind there, but the mind should be, there should be clarity and the vividness in the mind. Because if dullness falls, then where you feel heaviness in your mind, that is called cloudedness, that should be avoided. Because if your mind is, if there is no vividness, then mental laxity or mental sinking could be fall, and there's no clarity. If there's no clarity, while you're able to focus your mind single-pointedly, fixed there, then you have laxity, mental laxity. So while you are fixed single-pointedly, you should also have that alertness. So the stability, being able to stay focused, is hindered by excitement and mental laxity. Distraction and excitement hinder us to have stability, whereas to have that clarity and vividness, alertness in the mind while being focused, hindering that is mental laxity and cloudiness. And so within the mental excitement and mental sinking, there are gross and subtle layers of them. So when you have the subtler excitement, and what happens is you are able to stay focused, but then from the side of the mind, your mind is slightly going off the focus. So distraction and mental excitement hinder stability, whereas clarity and alertness is hindered by mental laxity or mental sinking. And so these are the two obstacles. Excitement and laxity are the two obstacles for us to have the single-pointed concentration, shamatha. So what we should so what we must do is we have to know first what are the causes that leads to mental excitement and laxity. Mental excitement, when you are overly alert, then what it can lead to is mental excitement. Whereas when you are feeling too low in spirit, then this leads to mental laxity or sinking. So when there's danger of becoming too high in your state of mind, then you should actually bring it down, mellow it. Whereas when your mind is too low, then you have to bring it up. So the atmosphere, the weather also has some effect, and also the geographical location of the place also has some effect on our mind. And so when you are on a higher place and in the morning, it's more you could have more alertness. Whereas if the place is low or there's more darkness, then there's danger of the mental sinking. So what do we do to counter these? The over alertness and over sinking, kind of low spiritedness. You have to, when there is low spirit, then you have to actually feel happy. Bring it up through joy, bring joy in your mind. And so those things which give you joy and happiness should be used to uplift the mind. Whereas if your mind is too distracted, to lower it, to mellow it down, then you have to do those meditations which actually makes it more mellow. So in the process of developing shamatha, we have to be able to stay fixed, single-pointedly, and also have alertness. So, of course, for the object of your meditation, you can use external objects like form and so forth, or you can use the different points in the body, or you can use impermanence as your object of meditation. So, of course, concentration is something that a quality which is developed within the mind and not the sensory perceptions. So for some beginners, maybe it's necessary to look at the object without getting distracted to any other object, and while looking at the object, with your eyes, your mind is actually thinking of that object. That is for the beginner level practitioners. Certain instruction texts also mention these, but the main object is the image that is formed in your mind, and in your mind itself, that is your focus of the meditation. So first, you look at a picture or image of a Buddha, for example, and after having looked at it, immediately when you actually close your eyes and think about it, there will be a clear image of the Buddha in your mind. So that is what is known as the reflection or image of concentration. So that is what you have to use, not just looking at external object itself all the time. So for Buddhists, we can use Buddha statue or Buddha image, but you can also use something like flower as well. For general practitioners. And then when you relate it with, connected with Tantra, you can actually use the different points in the body and to focus on the image of the Buddha within them, or you can focus on the 3 channels and the chakras, or and within these channels and chakras you can focus or visualize light and going up and down and so forth. So there are different purposes of when you choose the objects for scholarship or learning and to become learned, an object for countering your behavior and so forth. So when you actually sit down for shamatha meditation, you should check your mind, try to focus on the object that you have chosen, and then when the mental sinking and excitement happens, you should show the counter forces to them. And in this way, you can develop the 9 steps to shamatha, such as placing the mind and continuous placement and patched placement and so forth. And then you come to the mental equipoise, and you experience physical pliancy, mental pliancy, physical pliancy, and the bliss of these pliancies and so forth. And then finally, when your mind is steadily focused on the object without any of the excitement, mental excitement, and the sinking, and you have developed shamatha. So, having developed enthusiasm in this way, I should place my mind in concentration. For the person whose mind is distracted, dwells between the fangs of disturbing conceptions. So, it's important this shows the importance of not getting distracted. So, with regard to the world, however, through solitude of the body and the mind, no distractions will occur. Therefore, I should forsake the worldly life and completely discard distorted conceptions. So worldly life here refers to your relations and so forth. In relation to whom, your relatives and so forth, in relation to whom the negative emotions could arise. So worldly life is not forsaken because of attachment to people and due to craving for material gain and the like. So the purpose of shamatha, developing shamatha, is for us to develop vipassana, and particularly the vipassana, which is the transcendental type of, and not the worldly or mundane type of vipassana. So with regard to the mundane type of vipassana, they can help to overcome the type of hindrance for that particular ram that you want to attain, and not the higher ones. And so here we are talking about the transcendental, which is the vipassana realizing selflessness. Therefore, I should entirely forsake these, and for this is the way in which the wise behave. So many of our attachment and lust and so forth becomes arise because of grasping at some self. So having understood the disturbing conceptions are completely overcome by superior insight and dealt with calm abiding. First of all, I should search for calm abiding. This is achieved through the genuine joy of those unattached to the world life. Because of the obsession one transient being has for other transient beings, they will not see their beloved once again for many thousands of lives. So verse number 11, verse number 12. So here the childish is ordinary beings. You have to keep distance from ordinary childish people. So solitude here could be twofold. One is physical solitude, which is staying away from the social kind of gatherings and so forth. And then mentally, you should also be separate yourself from distractions and. Verse number 17. Verse number 18. Hence, the wise should not be attached, because fear is born from attachment. With a firm mind, understand well that it is the nature of these things to be discarded. And so, next verse 20 shows to abandon attachment to material wealth and so forth. So verse number 22, if even the conqueror was unable to please the various inclinations of different beings, then what need to mention a malicious person such as I? Therefore I should give up the intention to associate with the worldly. So verse number 25 down shows solitude in terms of staying away keeping physical solitude, staying away from the social, from the world. Verse number 29 done. Verse number 30. Then, because of its order, not even the foxes will come close to this body of mine, for this is what will become of it. So after death, we have also the meditation on the mindfulness, placement or establishment of mindfulness of body, mind, sensations, and also mental objects. So after death, what happens is the body turns very foul and detesting, horrible. So when I visited Thailand in the past, at the entrance there, they have some pictures of dead bodies, which are like dead bodies that have that were 1 day old or a few days old and so forth, turning blue. Some bodies turning blue, and some bloated, and also giving foul smell, and so forth. And so these are objects for cultivating mindfulness of body. And so when you see these, what it helps is to remind you that my body also will turn like this, and then that helps to counter your attachment to the body. And then the mindfulness of sensation or feeling helps you to see the origin of suffering. And then mindfulness of the mind, since it cannot be found when you analyze, when you look for, search for it, then what it leads to is the mindfulness of the mind, and then that leads in turn to the mindfulness of selflessness. Although this body arose in one thing, the bones and flesh in which was created will break up and separate. How much more so will friends and others? At birth I was born alone, and at death too I shall die alone. As this pain cannot be shared by others, what use are obstacle-making friends? In the same way, as travelers on a highway leave one place and reach another, likewise, those traveling on the path of a conditioned existence leave one birth and reach another, until the time comes for this body to be supported by 4 pallbearers, while the world is standing around stricken with grief. Until then, I shall retire to forest. So when you become old and frail and then die, your body will be carried by people on the stretcher. And so it will be too late to repent when you are dying. So what you can do is, from now on, you should seek solitude and do practice. Then next, befriending no one and begrudging no one, my body will dwell alone in solitude. If I am already counted as a dead man, when I die, there will be no mourners. And as there will be no one around to disturb me with their mourning, thus there will be no one to distract me from my recollection of the Buddha. Therefore I shall dwell alone, happy and contented with few difficulties, in a very joyful and beautiful forest, pacify all distractions. Having given up all other intentions, being motivated by only one thought, I shall strive to settle my mind in equipoise and to subdue it. Both in this world and the next, desires give rise to great misfortune. And so the desire objects, such as form, smell, touch, taste, and sound, give rise to attachment. In this life, killing, bondage, and flaying. In the next, the existence of the hells. For the sake of women, my many requests are first of all made through go-betweens. All forms of transgression and even notoriety are not avoided for their sake. I engage in fearful deeds for them, and will even consume my wealth. But these very bodies of the earth, which I greatly enjoy in sexual embrace, are nothing other than skeletons. And then 43 shows the procedures that are followed in marriage. In the first place, I made efforts to lift. And when it was raised, she bashfully looked down. Previously, whether anyone looked or not, her face was covered with a cloth. Yet now, why do I run away upon directly beholding this face, which disturbs my mind, the mind, as it is being revealed to me by the vultures? Previously, I completely protected her body when others cast their eyes upon it. Why, miser, do you not protect it now, while it is being devoured by these birds? Since vultures and others are eating this pile of meat that I behold, why did I offer flowers, flower gardens, sandalwood, and ornaments to that which is now the food of others? If I am frightened by the skeleton I see, even though they do not move, why am I not frightened by walking corpses, which are moved around by few impulses? Although I am attached to it when it is covered with skin, why do I not desire it when it is uncovered? Since I have no need for it, then why copulate with it when it is covered? Since both excrement and saliva arise solely from food, why do I dislike excrement and find joy in saliva? Cotton, too, is soft to touch. But while I find no sexual delight in a pillow, I think that a woman's body does not emit putrid odor. Lustful one, you are confused as to what is unclean, thinking that they cannot sleep with this cotton, although it is soft to the touch. Confused, negative, and lustful people become angry towards it instead. If I am not attached to what is unclean, then why do I copulate with the lower parts of others' body, which are merely cages of bones tied together by muscles plastered over with mud of flesh? I myself contain many unclean things which I constantly have to experience. So why, because of an obsession for uncleanness, do I desire other bags of filth? But it is the flesh that I enjoy. If this is what I wish to touch and behold, why do I not desire it in its natural state, devoid of any mind? Furthermore, any mind that I may desire is unable. So this body that we become attached to, And so if I'm not attached to what is unclean, why do I copulate with a lower? No. So verse number 64 down, 65 and so verse number 71, 72, 73, (76) Some sell their own bodies, and without any power are employed by others. For even when their wives give birth, their children fall at the feet of trees and in lonely places. So fools who are deceived by desire and wishing for livelihood think, "I shall earn my living." And then, although afraid of losing their lives, they go to war. Others become slaves for the sake of. So, with regard to material wealth, in the beginning there's difficulty gaining them, and once you have gained them, you have the difficulty of actually keeping them, protecting them. These days we have lots of talk about black money, so this shows how difficult it is, how much difficulty and problems this wealth gives. So in the end, those wealth and properties that you have actually accumulated goes to somebody else's hands when you die. Verse number 84. When one has contemplated the miseries of hell, it will be clear that there is nothing comparable to the harm caused to desirous beings, even by weapon, poison, fire, or ravines and foes. So verse number 86 down shows the good qualities of place of solitude. In joyful houses of vast flat stones, cooled by scented moonlight, fanned by the peaceful silent forest breeze, thinking of what is of benefit for others. So living. So it says when number 89 says. So in the beginning of this chapter, there is the meditation on how to, teaching on how to develop concentration by thinking about the disadvantage and the shortcomings of the desire, attachment, and then also gathering all the favorable conditions for the single-pointed concentration. You develop concentration, and here the main practice is bodhicitta, as verse number 89 says, having in such ways as these thought about the excellence of solitude, I should completely pacify distorted conceptions and meditate on the awakening mind. So perhaps I will go through the rest of the text tomorrow, because it's related to what we will be doing tomorrow. So perhaps during the preliminary process of the initiation, I will go through the remaining part of this text. So tomorrow we'll have the initiation of tantric initiation of Chandrisik Avalokiteshvara, who is deity of compassion, And so it's related, he's related to our practice of Bodhisattva. And so, since we are going to be doing the practice in relation to generous sake of the highest, within the highest Yoga Tantra set, and therefore, so once you have taken the initiation of highest Yoga Tantra, then you will be able to also listen to teachings on the psychology that is taught in the Tantra, highest Yoga Tantra, particularly with reference to the subtle teachings. And otherwise, without the initiation, it would be like disclosing the secret of the Tantra to those immatured. So this Shangsim Mitazoki Mare Shageshrina Mitazoki. So this particular initiation came through Mitazoki, an Indian master who was said to have visited in a certain vision to Tibet. And in recent times, Takpo Karwang and Takpo Tempe Gelsen also had visions of this Mahasiddha Mitazoki. So this particular initiation is found in the the hundreds of initiations that come from Mitra. So these initiations were compiled by Mitazoka himself, it is said, and so Master this Mahasiddha Mitazoki was said to have actually carried out his deeds of helping others on the basis of his meditation and practice of Avalokiteshvara. And so this particular generous Avalokiteshvara initiation I received from Chijang Rinpoche, my junior tutor, and he in turn received it from Tata Rinpoche. And Tata Rinpoche actually received it from Purchok Champa Gyatso, who was a tutor to the 13th Dalai Lama. And so we'll do the initiation of this Avalokiteshvara. So that's what we are going to do tomorrow, and that's all I have to say. Good night. This is the dedication verse. Jeso Dalov Jinga Wadida Tamje Rabdong, the Sumshebe Yawatamje Gengo Kanla Chodonga Bate, Dagi Gewetz or Diguin, Sambo Chichi Rabdong or Gay.
Oh, yeah. That's the Todi, the and the Casa of the Dedication, Chanju Sem, any Kazetu Tony Tower.
So as a preparation for the initiation, tomorrow's initiation, you should meditate and reflect as much as you can on bodhicitta and the view of emptiness, the understanding of emptiness, which are indispensable. Especially this meditation on emptiness is indispensable for the meditation on deity, doing deity yoga practice. If you can actually have some understanding of emptiness, then when you actually dissolve in emptiness and rise into a deity, what you are doing is that you are doing rising into a deity in your visualization from within the meditation on emptiness. And therefore, you are not just arising into a deity just like that, but first have a very strong certainty about the emptiness. And then your mind, absorbed in emptiness, that transforms into the deity that you are going to arise into. And so for this practice of the Deity Yoga practice of that comes from within the understanding of emptiness should be coupled with bodhicitta in order to reach omniscient state of Buddhahood. Therefore, make these two practices and make sure that you come prepared with these two practices.